and gentlemen, boys and girls, monster kids of all ages and persuasions, welcome to the podcast devoted to the classic and sometimes not so classic genre cinema of yesteryear. This is the Bride of Monster Kid Radio. My name is Derek M. Cook. I'm your writer, host, and producer of the show. I'd like to welcome you to the show with a song. This is Dos Diablos from the band The Nematoads. It's from their album 5 Guns West. The Nematoads are a band based out of Austin, Texas. You can find them over at thenematoads.bandcamp.com, or better, go to nematoads.com, or best yet, go to monsterkidradio.net and follow the link in the show notes when you're done listening to this episode of the podcast. Go check out the Nematoads. We appreciate them letting us play their music here on the show. Let them know that you heard about them here on Bride of Monster Kid Radio. We are kicking off a month of werewolf fun here on the show, and I've been trying to come up with a clever name for the month. We just got done with Lucha de Mayo. Next month is Kai July. What are we going to call June? Well, maybe Howl at the Moon June, or Full Moon June, or June, or something. I'm not sure yet. I haven't decided. What do you guys and gals and everybody else think? Let me know. Drop me a line at monsterkidradio@gmail.com or call and leave us a voicemail at 360-524-2484. Let me know what you think we ought to call this month, since all we're talking about is werewolf movies. And we're kicking things off with a movie that if you had told me we'd be talking about on Monster Kid Radio, or even the Bride of Monster Kid Radio 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 3 years ago, I would have told you, no, we probably wouldn't be talking about this one. But here we are, talking about a movie from 1981. It's An American Werewolf in London. Now, there's a very specific reason. Actually, there's more than a few specific reasons we're talking about this movie, and we're going to get into it with this week's special guest, somebody that I've wanted to have on a podcast of my own for a very, very long time. Now, he's appeared on other podcasts. He's appeared at conventions, on panels. He's written, he's published, he's the man. He's Mark Finn. Now, if you know anything about me, and this is going to come up more than once, so I'm just going to go ahead and get it out of my system now. My favorite writer, living or dead, is Robert E. Howard. I've mentioned it a few times here on the show. I'm sure you're probably sick of hearing me talk about it, but really, when it comes to the man's work and his life, man, it's impacted me in ways that no other author has. And, you know, I read a lot. I'm aware of a lot of authors' work and lives, but Robert E. Howard is the one that really gets me going every single time. And Mark Finn is the man who has, for my money, written the definitive biography of Robert E. Howard, Blood and Thunder. Now, he is very involved in Robert E. Howard fandom, but he's also a monster kid, and I am so excited and so grateful that he is on the show this week. I promise we don't get bogged down in Robert E. Howard talk too much. We are going to spend most of our time talking about An American Werewolf in London. Of course, we also have Mark Matzke's Beta Capsule review, where he's doing his episode-by-episode breakdown of all things Ultraman. He's got another excellent installment reviewing an episode of Ultraman Ace, and a return feature here on the show, Kenny's look at famous monsters of Filmland. That's going to be coming up here shortly as well. But first, we've got some feedback, some listener emails I'd like to go over real quick. This one comes from Vincent Hannum. He is one of the podcasters behind the Camp Kaiju podcast. Hey Derek, I hope things are well in your world. Well, sir, they really are. I just watched The Colossus of New York, he says, and listened to your episode about it. What an extraordinary movie. It's so dense with themes, but riveting in its imagery and storytelling. Truly, my only complaint with the film is how short it is. Give me another 20 minutes to really flesh out some of these characters. What's the beef between the two brothers? And we'd have a film more often in the public discourse. Nevertheless, I'm all about hyping this movie up for those who don't know about it. He then provided a link to a Blu-ray release featuring The Colossus of New York, along with The Unknown Terror and a personal favorite of mine, Destination Inner Space. He asks if I've seen this edition. The answer is no, I haven't. And then he concludes by telling me there's a commentary track from Tom Weaver on this Blu-ray So he thinks this is the addition to spring for. Anyways, I always enjoy listening to your show and wishing you all the best. Cheers. Vincent, thank you for writing in. I've been listening to Camp Kaiju and I've been enjoying myself over there. And, listeners, Vincent's been on the show. Just once, but he's been on the show. So go check out the archives over at monsterkidradio.net. Look up the old episode of The Colossus of New York and see if you can find the episode that he was in. But Vincent was in, not the Colossus. I mean, it's two separate episodes. I didn't have the Colossus. You know what I mean. Go check it out. And Vincent, thank you for writing in. I appreciate it. We should have you back on the show at some point in the future. We also had an email come in from Marlo. Marlo writes, "Hello, Bride of Monster Kid Radio. I very much enjoyed the latest episode. Derek and Beth, I love your enthusiasm for the Luchador movies. I'd never seen Santo en el Hacha Diabolica, or the Deadly Hatchet. So I went looking for it and found it in Spanish with English subtitles on archive.org. It's the 1 hour and 14-minute version. I haven't had time to watch it yet, but I'm looking forward to it." Before I continue with the rest of Marlo's email, I know that I made a big deal about how I could not find a full-length version of this movie last week, and I spent hours upon hours upon hours using the YouTube auto-generated translated captions to create an English language subtitled version of the Santo movie, and that's what Beth and I talked about. And I know I talked about how nobody had ever seen it before with subtitles. Well, Marlo isn't the only person who brought this to my attention. It was also mentioned on Facebook in the Monster Kid Radio Facebook group, and I was a little embarrassed that I got so in the weeds and trying to come up with understandable and not at all confusing English language subtitled version of the movie that I just didn't bother looking anywhere else or digging deeper. I probably should have. Now, I will say in my defense that a lot of the English subtitled versions of this movie, and so far I found 3 more, are auto-generated using some sort of AI. You can tell. One of them, in fact, is just YouTube's auto-generation translation. Whereas what I did was actually looking at that and then trying to make it make more sense. So mine is probably a little closer to the intended story, but I couldn't say for sure. Like I said, I got so in the weeds or so focused on trying to create an English language subtitled version of the movie that I just stopped looking for other versions of it, and I probably shouldn't have done that. So sorry about that. I hope anybody who's seen the movie enjoyed it. All right, Marlo continues, "I really have come to love and deeply appreciate the independent and low-budget films, especially in this day of sequels and remakes. I was delighted to hear that you're setting your sights on werewolf movies. There are several werewolf movies where the lack of big studio funding and studio interference probably helped the film. 2 that come to mind are Neil Marshall's debut film, the classic Dog Soldiers, and the offbeat werewolf flick Late Phases, starring the great Nick D'Amici as a blind, elderly Vietnam veteran facing a werewolf. Thanks again for a great podcast, and please thank Mark Matzke for the Beta Capsule segment. I look forward to each of his reviews. All my best, Marlo." Marlo, I have passed your message on to Mark, and if he's listening, well, he heard it here as well. I have seen Dog Soldiers, and that does come up super, super briefly in the conversation with Mark and I. But Late Phases, I'm not familiar with. I have not seen. I'm going to add it to the list. Of course, my list of movies to watch is, at this point, miles long. But if you recommend it, and you're a monster kid, and you dig Late Phases, well, I'll have to bump it up the list, and I will check it out eventually. This month, when it comes to the werewolf movie coverage, I think An American Werewolf in London will be the most recent movie that we're going to talk about here on the show. We're going to get back into the more classic era for the rest of the month. I think, anyway, that's the plan, because I do have Curse of the Werewolf and Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman in the works. That's something we're going to be talking about here on the show later this month. But we'll see. We'll see. I think you're going to enjoy the conversation that I'm going to have with Mark Finlay. Actually, I already had the conversation, but through the magic of editing or time travel or whatever, you're going to hear the conversation. Coming up right after Kenny, right after Mark, right after this.
soon. This June, it's the Monster Bash Conference at the Pittsburgh Marriott North in Cranberry Township. Fans of classic horror and science fiction films and TV will gather from across the United States and beyond. It's where you can meet and get autographs from movie and TV actors and actresses. This June 20th through the 22nd, 2025, meet Catherine Lee Scott and Sharon Smythe from the original Dark Shadows TV show, plus writer and zombie from the original Night of the Living Dead, John Russo, and the kids and grandkids of the original Universal Monsters, Frankenstein, creature from the Black Lagoon, Dracula, the Wolfman, and the Mummy, Ron Chaney, Lynn Lugosi, Renee Browning. Also appearing, the Monsters movie grandpa Daniel Roebuck, TV horror host Son of Ghoul, an Ohio TV legend, and horror host Mr. Lobo. Renegade monster movie director David The Rock Nelson will be filming on site as well. You'll love shopping over 100 vendor tables featuring movie collectibles, DVDs, Blu-rays, vintage toys, vinyl records, monster magazines, comic books, and more to boggle your eyes. Rare film screenings, special talks, and live game shows where you can win great prizes. It's all part of Monster Bash at the Pittsburgh Marriott North, June 20th through the 22nd, 2025. For discounted advance admission, go to the website monsterbash.us. That's monsterbash.us. Or call 724-238-4317 for more information.
We love the Monster Bash! Woo!
Once this picture sinks its fangs into you, you will never be the same.
Don't say it. Hiss it. Plus another spine-chilling hit, The Boy Who Cried Werewolf, rated PG.
Live from the Land of Light in Nebula M78, home of the mighty Ultra Heroes, it's Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review. Ultraman Ace, Episode 42, Winter Horror Series, Mystery, Monster Wu Rises Again. Traveling through the Japanese Alps, a father and his daughter, Koyuki, are chased by terrible monster Iceron, which causes an avalanche to threaten a mountain village. Hokuto and the Umezus are enjoying a ski vacation nearby and make the acquaintance of Koyuki's grandfather. And when a group from the village reaches the resort, they tell of the appearance of Iceron. The old man urges Hokuto not to go out at night, so the two wait until morning, when they make a disturbing discovery, little Koyuki, who somehow survived the harsh elements. With the realization that her father could still be in the valley, Hokuto calls for tack, but their investigation moves slowly, and Koyuki accompanies her grandfather into the valley to conduct their own search. As Iceron emerges from a blizzard, they locate Koyuki's father. Incredibly, he appears to transform into Snow Monster Wu to take on Iceron, a battle which he may not win. Episode 42 of Ultraman Ace, the second of the Winter Horror series, premiered on January 19, 1973. Filmed on location, it offers wondrously snowy landscapes, an unusually well-crafted monster in Iceron, and the return of Wu, the hairy hominoid first encountered in episode 30 of the original Ultraman series nearly 6 years earlier. As in his debut appearance, Wu acts as a guardian monster and is treated with respect by an Ultra Brother, enabling him to survive as a kind of living legend. While not horror in a jump scare way, Mystery, Monster Wu Rises Again, concludes in haunting fashion. It's not necessarily a happy ending for little Koyuki, but strangely satisfying to see that Wu is always waiting in the wintry wilds to help the defenseless. For Monster Kid Radio's Beta Capsule Review, this is Mark Matzke reporting.
someone you can hold tight. The rats are coming.
I can change myself at will.
They haven't eaten yet, you know.
What are you talking about?
The rats. They haven't eaten since I got this summer. And I should think that they would be very hungry by now. They eat almost everything.
The man-eating killer rats are back. More gruesome, more terrifying than ever before. But they are not alone. The werewolves are here too. Evil, depraved, blood-sucking werewolves that will scare the pants right off you. You must take her to see. The rats are coming. The werewolves are here.
Don't miss the most unusual and exciting horror motorcycle film yet made.
I come to offer you youth and fresh blood.
Hey, we all know how we're going to die, baby. We're going to crash and burn.
Werewolves on Wheels, starring Steve Oliver and Severn Darden. The story of a motorcycle gang who ride into a new kind of hell. They ride wild, play hard, and fight brutal.
I write your unholy name thrice in blood.
Fire of Satan, you are one with them. Fire of Satan, you are one with them. Fire of Satan.
Werewolves on Wheels, the most eerie, the most chilling, the most terrifying motorcycle horror film ever made. Their survival was the torch, as one by one they became terrifying, bloodthirsty werewolves on wheels. Don't miss the first horror motorcycle film ever made, Werewolves on Wheels. Rated R.
Hello there, Monster Kid Radioheads. This is Kenny with a look at famous monsters of Filmland. On page 19 of Famous Monsters of Filmland number 1, we see a picture of a hairy, fanged beast, the first Wolfman featured in this classic magazine. It is Michael Landon from I Was a Teenage Werewolf in his iconic makeup. This was the start of a long love affair with this beloved monster in the pages of FM. This month, Derek and his guests are talking about werewolf movies, and I hope to present a history of these fan favorites and famous monsters. I will start at the end, just as Derek has done, as we look at how An American Werewolf in London was covered near the end of FM's foray-fueled run. In FM 177 from September of 1981, we find the first preview article on the film, which covered 5 pages with 6 photos. Here are some highlights. We tell you no lie when we say we are expecting great things from this film, An American Werewolf in London. A picture Henry Hull would have applauded. A movie that Larry Talbot would have stayed home to watch on TV. A motion picture for which Maria Ouspenskaya would have learned English. Why? Because it's John Landis' dream movie. The fantasy film he's wanted to make for 11 years. He wrote it, he directed it, and he's one of us. It would be incorrect to say he's a graduate of Famous Monsters because he's never graduated. He still reads it and writes to the editor. He discovered Rick Baker, Monster Maker, cast Forey Ackerman as the poor man's Buster Keaton, and made him a cameo star in Schlock, and put him in the jury box in the Kentucky Fried Movie. After 4 films which have been called outrageously funny, he has now directed his own screenplay, which has been called stylish, witty, and ultimately an absolutely terrifying tale. It's the latter part we like to hear best. An absolutely terrifying tale. Much of the force of my picture's horror derives from its modern mundane setting, he tells us. My werewolf does not prowl the night through desolate graveyards and ruined castles, baying at the full moon. My lycanthrope lopes through the foggy lanes of present-day London. We've been in present-day London, and it is a pretty scary place to begin with. The punk rockers, the hotel prices, the funny way people talk English there. You thought the transformation in The Howling was something? Even something else? Rick Baker echoes Al Jolson with, "You ain't seen nothing yet." As he declares, "I've been working on the project in secrecy for a long time, and have devised a unique new method that goes beyond Mamoulian's Jekyll Hyde transformation or any metamorphosis you've ever seen on the screen before. If this doesn't make your hair stand on end, you're bald." A final word from John Landis, the film's writer and director. Our werewolf is not the conventional two-legged man, not Hairy Face, son of Harry O. He's a four-footed beast from hell. When our actor changes into the werewolf, it will actually happen on the screen. No optical effects at all. 50 years ago, Ruben Mamoulian masterminded the classic transformation of Dr. Jekyll into Mr. Hyde. 50 years from now, we think they'll be talking about our quantum jump in transmorgification. We're sure they will, John, if they can pronounce it. You have the editor slavering at the jowls to see your American Werewolf in London. If you want to make a sequel, An American Werewolf in Horror Weird, I'm available without makeup, and I work for scale. Just toss me an old used alligator skin, and I'm in. All together now, students. London Beast is falling down, falling down, falling down. London Beast is falling down, my scare lady. Forey's breathless excitement for the film continued in FM 178 from October of 1981, with a 3-page extension which included this highlight. The Kentucky Fried Banana Monster escapes from the animal house and meets the Blues Brothers. That's the kind of movie we've come to expect from the unpredictable John Landis, star of stage, screen, and famous monsters. And that's the sort of film we're looking forward to in An American Werewolf in London. Something special, different, offbeat, unique. To begin with, Landis's lycanthrope is not the usual two-legged type. Not an upright Henry Hull, not a downright Larry Talbot, not a fearthright Oliver Reed, but a sure-footed, four-footed beast from Abaddon. That's a hell of a place. What Rob Bottin began in The Howling, John Landis tells FM, Rick Baker, Monster Maker, finishes in An American Werewolf in London. What we're promised, in other words, is to see a transformation scene that makes the Jekyll Hyde dance of Frederick March look like a waltz. The curse of the werewolf looked like a cure rather than a curse. The lycanthropic contortions of Lon Chaney Jr. looked like he took a slow-motion potion. Yes, before our very bulging eyeballs, we will see a transformation that would scare the ectoplasm out of a ghost. The most in transmorgification. And that's no idle boast, adds Landis. In FM 180 from January of 1982, Forey reports on the New York premiere and press junket. Here is a highlight from that. In the hotel restaurant the night before the showing, I noticed David Naughton and his wife come in. So I went over to their table with a copy of FM in my hands and laid it in front of David, saying, "You can't enjoy the picture without a program." The issue was opened to a page featuring a photo of David, and he looked up, startled, then laughed when I introduced myself as the editor. 48 hours later, I was in his room interviewing him. I asked him how strenuous it was doing the man-into-monster metamorphosis, and again he laughed. John Landis asked me if I thought I'd be physically up to it if I got the part. He warned me there might be 6 or 8 takes. That sounded like a picnic to me because I told him, "Oh, that Dr. Pepper commercial that I'd been doing for the past 4 years, sometimes we do as many as 40 takes." I asked Dr. Pepper and Mr. Hyde if he thought there was any danger of being typecast. David said he doubted it, although he'd have no objection to doing an occasional horror role, as it had been a lot of fun. That is all for this week's look at famous monsters of Filmland. We will have more next time. For MKR, this is Kenny saying adios.
This thing has been frozen in ice for 20 million years, so I figure it must be lonely.
From the dawn of man comes Schlock! A beast from 20 million years ago stalks the streets of today. A love stranger than King Kong. A monster more powerful than Godzilla. See a small California town learn the true meaning of terror. See the police and National Guard powerless before the awesome creature. Can nothing stop it? Can anything stop it? First, birth of a nation. Then, gone with the wind.
2001, A Space Odyssey.
Love Story.
The Godfather.
And now, Schlock! Schlock!
Widescreen color, rated PG.
This is Count Vlad, but you may recognize me by my more familiar name, Count Dracula, and I'm here to offer you a friendly warning. Derek and his guests often get excited, and occasionally this results in revealing key plot points of the movies they're discussing. In your parlance, you might call these revelations spoilers. You know how the children of the night, monster kids, can get sometimes. So consider yourself warned, and don't come begging to me to kill them for their transgressions afterward. I have more pressing issues to take care of, like that pesky Van Helsing.
Bride of Monster Kid Radio listeners, I've been wanting to get this guy on the show for a very, very long time, and I kind of chuckled there a little bit because I saw him recently on a YouTube show, and he mentioned he's a monster kid, he likes classic monster movies, and I thought, you know what? I should reach out to Mark Finn and see if he wants to be on Monster Kid Radio. I pulled him up on Facebook and saw that I did reach out to him about being on Monster Kid Radio a decade ago. And I ended the conversation with, let me get back to you after I check my schedule. Well, 10 years later. Oh, man, Mark, thank you for not giving up on us, and welcome to Bride of Monster Kid Radio.
Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here. I'm real excited to talk about Monster Kid stuff. I don't normally get to do that, so this is a real treat for me.
The reason he says he doesn't get to normally do this is, if you know Mark Finn's name, it's because you are a fan of Robert E. Howard, or at least aware of the fandom around Robert E. Howard. I've made no secret about how Robert E. Howard's my favorite author here on the show. There's not a lot of crossover. I mean, there's a little bit. There was that one Thriller episode, but there's not a lot of crossover between Howard and Monster Kid stuff. I knew Mark Finn through his excellent biography of the man, Blood and Thunder, The Life and Art of Robert E. Howard. I have both editions, and I'm a huge fan of everything that he's been involved with. I follow him on his website, his blog, The North Texas Apocalypse Bunker, and I even subscribe to his email list. But yeah, we don't hear a lot about monsters from you outside of the kind of things that certain meaty barbarians fight.
I actually have another circle for the Venn diagram of Monster Kid and Robert E. Howard.
Okay.
We know that, he wrote a lot of classic traditional monster stories in various characters, but he did them in his own way. Mm-hmm. There was always a twist with the Howard stuff. The most obvious example is Horror from the Mound, which gets credit for being the first weird Western. There were ghost story Westerns prior to that, but this is the one that Joe Lansdale read that made him go, oh, I can write stuff like this. So I'm going to count that as like the start of weird Westerns, really. But, he's got a vampire fighting a sharecropper, a Spanish vampire from the days of the conquistadors. And he did Mummies with Skullface. He did 2 werewolf stories, Wolf's Head and In the Forest of, I can never pronounce that French word. And of course, lots of ghosts. Oh, so many ghosts. He really had a desire to sort of put his own stamp on some traditional folklore. And so he doesn't get a lot of credit for it because Conan and Kull and Solomon Kane tend to overshadow, but they all had to fight something, and it was usually a cool monster. So
heck yeah. And it wasn't just fiction. I mean, he danced with werewolves with A Song of the Werewolf Folk, which is one of my favorite poems.
Yep.
He did kind of touch a little bit, and then, of course, his so-called Cthulhu tales and all that. They do get kind of spooky and Monster Kid-y in his own way, like you said. Black Stone is my favorite, Robert E.
Oh, yeah. Well, that's just a classic anyways, Worms of the Earth is one of the ones that chills me. I think it was a really good story where he had the awareness creep up on Bran McMorrin as to what he'd done. And we realize at about the time that he does, what a wonderful turn at the end of what's been a fairly straightforward revenge story for most of it. He was fantastic at that, and such a big fan and an appreciator of folklore. So he was always working with that stuff in his books. And I like the fact that vampires and werewolves were not spared this. I mean, he has, in Wolf said, he has the spirit of the original werewolf possessing the man at the beginning of the story. He didn't get it from a bite, he got it from possession. What an interesting turn on that. I just love the idea that there's more than one way to get to the monstery parts. Somebody recently I was talking about Sinners, and somebody made a comment about, I wish they'd stuck to traditional vampire lore. And I wanted to be snarky and go, oh, really? Which vampire is that? Eastern European, Spanish vampires, Chinese, because everybody's got a vampire and they're all very different, I didn't do that. I just basically said, I kind of like the fact that I didn't know what the things were. So I was able to be kind of pleased and surprised by that. And that seemed to mollify, but I always get a kind of a scant, if we're talking about pop culture vampires like Dracula, sure, he's got some standard stuff, that's fine. But if we're talking about any old werewolf, any old vampire, there's no I mean, you can do anything with that because it's such a ubiquitous concept. Oh, zombies. He did zombies too.
Yes. Dead Man's Hate, the poem Dead Man's Hate. Wonderful story and just a great take on like this vengeful spirit coming back, possessing this body. Oh, so good. And I could get into Robert E. Howard fandom stuff with you for hours, I'm sure.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, we should switch.
But I do want to circle back to something you just said here in a little bit regarding putting a twist on the classic tale. But we'll get there. When I did finally reach out to you after 10 years, it's like, so what do you want to talk about? What's something that you're passionate about? And you brought up werewolves.
Yep.
What is it about the lycanthropes that thrills you?
Growing up in the 70s, my initial experience with all of this stuff was television, late night TV at that. And late night TV in the 70s, I was fortunate enough to grow up close to a really large metropolitan area that had independent TV stations that were just broadcasting. It was basically a local access channel. And they had the channel that always ran the Ray Harryhausen movies. In the summer, they always ran Universal monster movies in October. These guys were cool. They knew what was up. So my first, even before King Kong, the first horror movie I ever saw was The Wolfman with Chaney Jr.
Wow.
And I was a little young to see that. It scared the bejesus out of me. It really did. And as I got older, but see, it wasn't like Dracula or The Mummy or anything else. I actually leaned into it because I think I really responded and sympathized with Lawrence Talbot as a kid. He didn't want to be a monster. In fact, he would have done anything to get rid of it, up to and including, ending his own life. And so not having an understanding of that as a kid, I nevertheless really responded to the idea of someone being two people. There's the civilized man and there's the beast within. There's the Jekyll and then there's the Hyde. And that transformative nature of the werewolf, that ability to completely lose all vestiges of what makes you and revert to an animal existence, and not just an animal existence, but a hungry animal existence. That terrified me. And still, it still fascinates and freaks me out, but because if you take away the fangs and the fur, it's not too hard to imagine people like Ted Bundy or Jeffrey Dahmer. They talk about feeling like there's someone else. Some of them do. Some of the serial killers do. But see, that's not that far off from this. And so that fascinates me in a way that vampires and zombies and some of the other traditional things don't. Vampires have been ruined by popular culture. I think pop culture vampires are they're just kind of useless, frankly.
Okay.
Well, because it was so ubiquitous. It was everywhere for so long. And I think familiarity sort of breeds contempt a little bit.
Okay.
We had dueling vampire movies and shows going on. True Blood became basically a soap opera with things that have retractable things. It was weird. Werewolves haven't really enjoyed. I think their renaissance, frankly, was in the 80s with the leap forward in special effects. And even though we've gotten some great werewolf movies over the years, and I'm certainly willing to list them with you, werewolves, they're still kind of ours.
Okay.
There's not really everybody knows the sort of checklist of what makes a werewolf, but even with that, there's a lot of variations still, and there's not an accepted consensus. So that's what I like. I like the idea primarily of losing control and becoming, something less than your thinking self. That's probably the thing that still keeps me coming back to stuff like that.
You were just talking about Sinners a second ago and not really knowing exactly what vampire type it was, what version of folklore. You're right. I think once we know them too much, once we're able to label them too much, they stop being scary.
Right.
And we build to these things because we like the scare. We like the woo part of it. And it's hard to have that if it's been overly explained or overly exposed. So I see where you're coming from on that.
Yeah. You probably, I don't know if you've seen Sinners or not. I know I didn't ruin anything. Everybody's talking about it's a vampire movie. Well, it's not. But yeah, I did think that they used one of the tropes, one of the established things in a very good way. And then the rest of it was just, we changed it for the story we need to tell. And you know what? That was great because I realized about myself about 15 years ago when it came to horror movies and horror novels and things like that. I like the mystery.
Mm-hmm.
I like that there are still blank spots on the map. I'm cool with it because in those areas and in those liminal spaces, we can have a Bigfoot. We can have a lost world. We can have, we can imagine whatever we can imagine, including monsters and horrifying things in the dark. That's a thing that changes our perceptions. It allows us to see the world in a different way. It allows us to relate to the world in a different way. And I think when you can see everything on the map or know everything about vampire lore, it absolutely just kills whatever buzz you might have for it, man. I don't want all of the world's computers to be wiped out, but an EMP might not be a bad thing for the short term. I think we could get it all back. We'd have to learn how to read again, but I'm okay with some stuff I don't know, I don't ever want to know for sure that the Loch Ness Monster doesn't exist. It's much more interesting to think they just haven't gotten a good photograph yet.
Yeah. I mean, that's why the Patterson film persists to this day with King.
Yeah, exactly.
Bigfoot. So yeah, even though everybody has an opinion on it and so many people have come forward and said it was just me in a suit, we want to have that bit of mystery there. So I totally understand that.
Totally.
And listeners, stay tuned because in September, we're going to be talking about Bigfoot movies here on the show. So
cool.
We're calling it Sasquatchember is what we're going to dip into some cryptid fun here in a few months. So stay tuned for that. I have not seen Sinners yet. I'm a bad monster kid. I've just been so busy and decided to spend my time watching Clown in a Cornfield instead of Sinners. And I probably should have seen Sinners instead. But,
I do think one movie is better than the other one. I don't want to perjure myself but I feel like one of those movies was a little bit better made.
I will eventually see Sinners. I will eventually see it. It's still playing. So yeah, I'll make some time to get down there and check it out, even though it doesn't have any werewolves in it, whatever.
You will dig it.
I'm sure. I've heard from so many people that I respect and trust have told me, without giving me spoilers, that it's an amazing film. So It's on my list for sure. You said there are some good werewolf movies that you have seen that haven't really ruined the mythos or the mystique of werewolves for you. What are some that just off the top of your head?
One that comes right to mind is Ginger Snaps for what they were able to add into the whole werewolf idea to begin with. This notion of the onrush of puberty and adolescence and the idea of a menstrual cycle having to do with a lunar cycle. And I just love that. What a great idea. Those sorts of things to me really stand out. Another great one that I just love, Dog Soldiers.
I was wondering if that was going to come up because that is a good one.
Yeah, it's just, they don't have to always be complicated. And sometimes they just can be elemental. And that movie to me is a very elemental kind of a thing, Those are two that come right away to mind. Right up until the ending, I really liked Del Toro's turn as Talbot in the remake of The Werewolf.
Oh, okay.
The Wolfman. I didn't like how they chose to. I'm trying not to spoil it for somebody. I don't like how they upped the stakes for the finale.
Okay.
But I think right up until all of then, they did a really great job. And I think Del Toro channeled Lon Chaney Jr. for his performance. I really was just blown away by how he managed to get that pathos and that sort of hangdog. I don't know. It was just great. There was a lot to like about it. And especially by keeping it sort of a period piece and having the alienists and the psychologists, trying to, clearly it's not a man that turns into a wolf. It's just a man who goes nuts, and we'll show you. That's such a great scene. That's such a wonderful, the arrogance and the hubris, we know everything. That's always a good turn for these kinds of movies. You always like it when the know-it-all gets it in the neck.
Yes. Yes.
Oh, there's no way that they could possibly, I'm just going to love that. Those are fun. And the Wolfman was full of, well, surely he can't be. No, he is. He is.
Yeah, it's on the tin. It's come on. Right on. So we're doing nothing but werewolf movies this month on the show, and we're going to be talking about, like, Curse of a Werewolf is going to come up later on this month. The single Hammer film that tackles the werewolf mythos with Oliver Reed, which does get a slight name drop just for a second in the movie that we're going to talk about here in a second. I'm not sure what other werewolf movies we're going to cover, but I've got a handful that I'm eager to show my wife, Beth, who has not seen as many classic monster movies as I have.
Awesome.
But she's talking about Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman, which she's never seen. So that one is a personal favorite of mine because it's got Lon Chaney. But for my money, it also has one of the best rising from the dead sequences in any classic horror film. The very beginning in the tomb and Chaney or Talbot coming back. So good.
David is 23. He's about to do some terrible things. But don't blame David. He just isn't himself these days. Werewolf. From the director of Animal House, a different kind of animal. An American Werewolf in London. Rated R.
Now playing at selected theaters near you. Check your local newspaper for listings.
But the movie we're talking about this week is a little outside of the Monster Kid Radio wheelhouse, but I was thinking about it when you brought it up. It's made by a bona fide monster kid. A couple of bona fide monster kids.
Yep.
It's even got, for what little there is, original music by a guy who scored a number of Monster Kid not-so-classics. I'm immediately thinking of Robot Monster.
Right.
Elmer Bernstein did the music for American Werewolf in London, directed and written by John Landis, and some amazing special effects work by Rick Baker, a couple of guys that, are monster kids that made good.
Not just made good. I love the fact that the first Academy Award for special effects makeup was for a horror movie.
Isn't that fantastic?
Yeah. The first actual Academy Award in my lifetime that was created, while I was alive to see it, was for special effects makeup. And that happened in 81 for 82. Anyways, the point was there was this explosion of creativity thanks to Star Wars and to a lesser extent Jaws. But those two movies really kicked off this notion of advancements in special effects, and we couldn't keep up with it. But one of the first guys that did it was Rick Baker. And Rick Baker has since gone on to be, I think, the most decorated makeup artist ever. I mean, he's done, if you have a favorite makeup, it was probably him. I mean, he just did so much good stuff. But that was his first Academy Award for American Werewolf. It's still a jaw-dropping transformation, especially because now what they call it now, it's all done in camera, which is, the cool way of saying they filmed it instead of CGI'd it.
It's a phenomenal sequence, and I hadn't watched it in years. It's one of those movies that I feel like I watched a lot of when I first started getting into horror movies and that sort of thing, rented it on video all the time, but I watched it so many times that I just, like, do I need to watch it again? I mean, I've seen it so many times, but it was so nice to revisit it again, and I found myself squirming during the transformation scene, even though I'm so overly familiar with it, not just from the film, but it gets cited and shown and put in clips and examined, and so many YouTubers talk about it. It's still such an uncomfortable scene, and that speaks to the power of not just Rick Baker, although he's really responsible for it, but the performance. David Naughton is phenomenal. The cinematography, they don't flinch. It's so good.
And this is something that I have a thesis that I'm sort of working on regarding the cinema of the late 70s and early 80s. I think it was a result of the kids coming out of UC Film School in the late 60s and 70s. This is Lucas, John Milius, Coppola, these guys.
That whole crowd.
Yeah. Later go on and do these amazing things. The cinema verite was still kind of going on, this cinema of truth, this idea of life being stranger than art and all that good stuff. We now know that shaky footage is the visual language for, oh, it's real. It's happening right now. But back then, taking something off a tripod and getting a lens flare, those were radical concepts. But one of the things that the writing did from this time period was they started throwing out downer endings. The idea that life isn't always happily ever after. Things don't always just wrap up neatly and tidily. And if you think about the films from this time period, I mean, for crying out loud, we can even go to the Bad News Bears. They don't win the game, right? As an 8-year-old, that's a good lesson to learn. Sometimes you don't win. Sometimes you get second place, and it's just enough to tell them to shove it. That's your victory. That's your hollow victory. Alien, whole crew wipes out. It's one of the first final girl of the modern era. The Last American Virgin, he does not get the girl. Blade Runner, everyone is going away to die. The Howling, she tells the story, nobody cares. In fact, they all think it's a joke. And American Werewolf in London, David catches a bullet in the end. They don't go away and live happily ever after, even though you're rooting for them as a couple. There's this strange little period of about 5 years. Dragon Slayer.
Yeah.
He kills the dragon. He loses his mentor. What does he get out of it? The girl and a horse. No gold, no glory, no nothing. Just you get to live and ride away somewhere away from this guy. That's your reward. American Werewolf is right there in that pocket of this just realistic, let's do this not like movies, but let's do this like how it would be in real life. And I don't think the film gets enough credit for the innovation of that. He turns into a werewolf, not a wolf man.
True.
A major departure from every other werewolf movie from, starting, if you want to go back to Beauty and the Beast in the silent era and going forward. It was always a guy with stuff on his face, and now it's not. Folklore. Just straight up folklore. One guy's the werewolf. If you kill him, that's fine. Every good werewolf story has a hunter cutting off a werewolf's arm, and then he comes back and finds his wife with a bloody stump or whatever.
Yeah.
This was the first time I'd seen in a lifetime of, granted, not more than a dozen years, but this is the first time I'd seen folklore werewolves in a movie setting. And this notion of all of that being, this is what the movie's about. There's no poem from the gypsies, right? There's no wolf's bane. There's none of that, man. It's just, this guy turns into a werewolf, and frankly, that's enough.
Yeah. The only pentagram we have is on the wall somewhere. They don't even really get into that too much.
Yep. And this is the other thing, Derek. Yeah. The movie makes it very clear that isn't real life, right? And while they're sitting there talking about the pentagram, Universal Studios maintain that's the mark of the Wolfman, right? So This is the postmodern part. We're talking about werewolf movies in a movie with a werewolf in it. The movie about werewolves is actually talking about werewolves. It's almost not quite like when Jamie, what's his name, starts giving you the rules in Scream.
Right.
When you're, that's the part of that I thought was really, really cool. I need to just go ahead and write this whole thing out and publish it somewhere because what's there is pretty fascinating. Oh, The Thing, another one from 1982.
Definitely a downer ending.
Yeah, man.
Definitely.
If you start go back and start looking for it, you'll see there's a lot of them.
Yeah.
And it was all stuff that I was watching at that age, and boy did it do a number on me.
To go back to what you said, Empire Strikes Back, they all lose. So
right, of course, the biggest of the what just happened endings. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Totally. 1980. Ground Zero, man.
There you go. I had forgotten about the self-referential material in this film when I sat down to watch it again. And I really appreciated that. It made the film feel more real life to me because, of course, they're going to talk about, werewolf movies or whatever. It's whenever I'm watching a zombie movie set in modern day, it happens. Yeah. Nobody ever says, hey, did you not see a zombie movie?
Right.
This is kind of pop culture knowledge now. So they reference it, but it doesn't take the mystery out of it because it still kind of plays with its own kind of lore regarding how werewolves work. And I really appreciated that. And that's where we got the Oliver Reed reference when David asks the nurse, have you ever seen The Wolfman? The one with Oliver Reed? No, the older one. And I thought that was a clever little oh yeah,
It's very clever. It's obvious that it was written by, a horror fan. It was clear that Landis was working with something really specific. And I think you're right. I think that's the part of the allure of that is that acknowledgement that, yeah, we know there's pop culture werewolves. And of course, before we even really get a sense of the werewolf that he's going to become, there's all these references to Lon Chaney Jr. and Oliver Reed, and any monster kid is going to, that's a lane to get in right there.
Yeah.
Okay, I know where we're going. I know where the on-ramp is, right?
Right.
And then, you get there and the on-ramp's closed and now you're going down folklore lane going, I don't know what any of this is. Oh my God, that's terrifying. Pretty cool, man. A great bait and switch.
Oh, it's super cool. We start talking about Lon Chaney or Bela Lugosi gets mentioned and all of that. You feel like the movie's made for us as monster kids.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not just fan service. It's not just, hey, this is a regurgitation of everything. This is something new. I'm going to put my spin on it. Landis wrote an incredible script. Some of the back and forth between the two American friends was improv, but that wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for the characterizations that Landis wrote in the first place.
Yes.
And the two of them together, Griffin Dunn, David Naughton, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but here in Arizona, we've got dueling fan conventions happening the same weekend, Days of the Dead and Mad Monster Party. And if I remember correctly, one's going to be at one convention, the other's going to be at the other. And I don't know how I'm going to see them both. I don't know how I'm going to pull that off.
Dang.
Because they're both great. They're both fantastic.
Part of me wants to just say, go to the Mad Monster Party because it's called the Mad Monster Party.
True.
I mean,
true.
I feel like that's going to be our peeps.
Yeah. Yeah, probably more so. More so.
I hope Naughton's there.
Yeah. But I love the two of them together. Their chemistry is fantastic. And I'm sure part of that's because they were like two of the four Americans that were over there working on the movie. There weren't very many fellow countrymen, so they were kind of forced to trauma bond together a little bit. But their chemistry is fantastic.
They got a good director in Landis. Landis knew to kind of give them a little space. And as a result, man, that movie is eminently quotable.
Mm-hmm.
So many quotes. I've quoted from that film for years. Usually when I'm trying to put on socks and in danger of falling over, I will say out loud, I didn't mean to call you Meatloaf, Jack. Just because I just know something's about to change.
Well, speaking of Meatloaf and Jack, that's another amazing makeup journey that he goes on. It's when you think werewolf movies, I don't think you normally think rotting undead, but this is an incredible makeup, and it's probably the first time I ever saw a werewolf film or story that specifically was linked to undead. In my mind, they were always like two separate things. Undead's one thing, werewolves, it's supernatural, but it's not quite the same. I remember even getting upset when not upset. Well, Okay, maybe upset I was younger. The 1997 House of Frankenstein TV miniseries, where they called the werewolf an undead creature. It's like, no, it's not. It's something different. But
Right.
I was a younger Derek and didn't know any better. In this one, they're really kind of linked, kind of, in a way that I'd never seen before.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for it because we got more of that awesome Griffin Dunn performance. He's so good.
As a kid, of course, I'm obsessed with makeup, special effects like everybody else. But I remember I was fascinated with his first appearance where he's at his freshest because, if I ever meet Rick Baker, I'm going to ask him about it. There is a tiny little piece of skin that is hanging off of his esophagus. And whenever he talks, it moves just ever so slightly, just this tiny little, and I tend to be a nail biter. So my first instinct is just pick it, just get it, pull it down, get it off. Made me crazy. I've had to train myself over the years to not look at Jack's throat in the hospital scene because if I do, I'm not going to see anything else. I'm just going to see that little flap of skin getting bigger and larger until it's like a tie waving in the wind. It just makes me crazy, man.
It's an image. Oof.
Right.
Oof. Now, I love that stuff too. And I've said this on the show repeatedly that I used to think I'd be a filmmaker when I grew up. And I did all as many as I could living in Cheyenne, Wyoming, of all places, makeup courses and explorations and all that. Watched all the documentaries. Tom Savini was my hero, all that stuff. But you see something like this and you know why Rick Baker won. He's a master.
Yeah. I mean, he was building off of Dick Smith.
Yeah.
Derek, you can't see everybody. Derek and I are nodding at each other because we know the same things, but I'm saying it out loud because I know some of you can't see us vibing over here. But, he was building off of Dick Smith, who had done some work with bladders and extensions. But this was the first time that he was doing a full, he goes from human to wolf in about 4 minutes. And, the fact that every single one of those shots is a different piece of makeup, every single one of those shots is a different effect. They're not all done the same way. If you look at it, it really is a master class in we have a lot more money, but it's still a limited budget. How are we going to do this? And of course, there was no way he wasn't going to win for that, obviously. But holy smoke. As soon as he did that, the door was wide open, after that.
Yeah, it's pretty phenomenal stuff. The transformation is what stands out. But and I know we don't get into a lot of gore here on the show, but the gore effects of the rotting zombies and like the werewolf attacks and in the movie theater, we've got all the victims just kind of hanging out, waiting for David to show up.
Oh yeah. Oh God. The whole thing during the Piccadilly Theater is just beautiful. I mean, it's a wonderful scene. And you're right. There is a lot of, I don't think about it because it didn't bother me that much, but thinking back on it now, by necessity, the horror movies in the 40s and 50s had to be tamer. They would show Lon Chaney Jr. biting somebody, but it was always with his back to the audience.
Right.
So they couldn't see anything. One of the most terrifying scenes for me in any movie, and I'm talking in my top 5 scariest scenes of all time, is the scene where Griffin gets attacked. When Jack gets attacked on the moors and that shot of the wolf just savaging him, it still bothers me. It's a creepy scene. I'd never seen anything like that. And I think that's what the gore does. I think we're back to this notion of, I want to make a realistic werewolf movie and not a Hollywood werewolf movie. If you've got something that big, that vicious, that hungry, of course there's going to be carnage. And I think that was a deliberate choice to sell the severity of what we were dealing with. The movie's funny, right? And people call it a comedy horror movie. I don't know if I like that, because it's not slapstick, or it's not like Army of Darkness funny,
Right.
It's situationally funny. And the humor is always an uncomfortable black humor chuckle.
Right.
I think because he had two tones in this film, I think he had to offset the general camaraderie and the relationships with some stark blood and guts, literally, you know?
And John Landis knows comedy. I mean, he did the Blues Brothers, didn't he? I mean, he knows comedy.
He did.
Comedy and horror, pretty closely related when it comes to like emotional release and timing and pacing and that sort of thing. And there are moments in this that once you get towards the end, I am not proud of saying that I kind of giggled when a body goes flying out of a car in the middle of a big car wreck scene. I mean, it's so over the top and ludicrous and ridiculous.
Yes.
But I laughed, even though it's a horrible thing to see happen to somebody.
Right. Yeah, I'm a big fan of the guy getting his head bit. That I just love that scene where the werewolf just clamps on and you see it. That's the other part of this that's just like, we'd never been treated to something like that.
Right.
And I don't want to throw Rob Bottin under the bus. I think he's incredibly talented. I'll stack his work on The Thing up against anybody else's sizzle reel. But as cool and different as his werewolves were, I don't think that they had the same visceral, elemental drive that the werewolf in American Werewolf has. They're bipedal werewolves. They seem to really like being a werewolf. They got this, not quite a human intelligence, but they're definitely, they're smarter than the average wolf. I don't think Dante was trying to reinvent the wheel here. I think he was just trying to do really cool effects. I think Landis was trying to reinvent the wheel, if that comparison makes sense.
No, that does make sense. And I like The Howling. And I don't think.
Oh yeah, Hell is great. Yeah, that's why I said I didn't want to throw it under the bus, because it's a fantastic movie. It's just not the same thing as American Werewolf. American Werewolf kind of stands out. I can't think of anything else in this space. Outside of folk horror. When you get into folk horror, you start playing around with this more. But I can't think of a more traditional werewolf movie that made use of the folklore the way American Werewolf did. Can you think of one?
No, because you mentioned folk horror, and I'm a huge fan of a lot of folk horror.
Yeah.
I think once you start going that route, then you have to have the lore, the folklore in it. But
I know, right? It really is weird. American Werewolf kind of stands apart. Sometimes when I'm thinking about like some of the most influential movies on my writing, that's in there for what I took away from the story. I mean, the special effects are gorgeous. It's scary. It's weird. It's creepy. It's funny. The way it was written and the way that the story was utilized and the way the plot unfolds, it really is almost a one-off film. Yeah. Maybe we should have talked about the Wolfman instead.
No, this is good. I'm kind of stretching the parameters of what we talk about here on the show. I know we're typically a classic or not so classic monster movie podcast, but again, Landis, Baker, Monster Kids that did good. They would love the stuff that we talk about every other time here on the show. Let's talk about what they do here. We keep talking about The Howling, and Baker was originally going to do The Howling, wasn't he? And then Landis brought him back over to this.
Yeah, and of course he had already been working with Landis. He did the ape suit in Schlock, and performed. He had already been King Kong in Dino De Laurentiis's Not a King Kong movie. He had already, and he'd done some apprentice work with Dick Smith, so he knew kind of all he was caught up in terms of what everything was. I know he consulted with Dick Smith on American Werewolf, but Smith said somewhere that, yeah, Rick's doing stuff that I wouldn't have even thought of. I mean, like, he was like very complimentary of what Baker was doing at that time. So he goes on to do Harry and the Hendersons and Gorillas in the Mist and all this good stuff. Bottin, he didn't fizzle. I'm just surprised that he didn't have the same career trajectory, because they were both in demand. And I think Rick Baker quickly got priced out of the market. I think for what he did, I think that Academy Award might have added a 0 or 2 to his asking price.
American Werewolf in London, how did it do when it first ran versus, say, like The Thing, which did not do well? It took years to become a
do well either. Yeah.
So I don't know how American Werewolf did back in the day.
In fact, I saw it on home box office.
Okay.
I saw it on HBO the night it premiered on HBO. It was a big deal. My parents made me cover my eyes during the shower scene, but I got to watch all of the horrible violence unfold. My Puritan upbringing is intact. I remember reading about it in Fangoria and one of the other magazines at the time, but it's always been sort of a hidden gem. All monster kids know American Werewolf. That's not an obscure film for any of us. But if you ask people what their favorite horror movie is, they're going to hit the big ones. They'll give you a Shining or an Exorcist. But in fact, I know I'm talking with a connoisseur when American Werewolf is on anybody's list. I'm like, okay, he knows what's up. She's down. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a really solid film. I mean, it's not just, a werewolf movie. It's not just a horror film. There's some really cool stuff going on with the relationships. There's some really progressive things happening there with Jenny Aguter's performance and the rate at which she and our lead fall in love with each other and their relationship. And I mean, that was pretty progressive, I think, the way she just kind of brings him home from the hospital.
And it seems crazy, in this modern day and age, but I remembered early on in the watching and the rewatching of this, he'd been in the hospital for a month, so it wasn't like he came in for a tonsillectomy and she said, you're cute, let's go home. He'd been working with her for a month or nearly a month,
Good point.
It didn't just fall out of the sky. Well, we are still dealing with the end of the 70s, a little more free love happening going on. So, I sort of hand wave that. That's okay. I think that relationship has to happen in the movie. It can't just be him and Jack talking as much fun as that is, especially the movie theater scene with Skeletal Jack at that point. He's Jack Skellington. There you go.
Oh, no.
And I just love the fact that he's got just a little piece of skin that's kind of covering like the side of his jaw. And it buckles a little bit every time he talks, And I don't know if Frank Oz was around, but whoever was puppeting that head paid attention to how you move your teeth and your jaw when you talk. Mm-hmm. My teeth don't click together whenever I say every word. And a lot of times it's the other stuff that's moving around. And so he, when he's talking, he goes, oh, be serious, would you? And the mouth only closes at the end of the sentence. And it was just that little stuff. There were so many little details that just felt right. They just felt right. And the self-referential, the amount that there's so many Easter eggs. There's a basket of Easter eggs to go through, not just for Landis, but other movies. It's a little daunting, but that was one of the first movies where I realized that these people were people and that they could put an in joke in. You could have See You Next Wednesday and have that be a movie that shows up in all of your films, that Mickey Mouse thing that Griffin Dunn plays with and then sets on the table. That's in all of Landis's stuff too. There's just little weird, interesting things. It was also when I realized that Landis was the auteur of the movie. That was when I sort of grokked to, I can follow a director. I can be a fan of a director.
Okay.
I can go look at another John Landis movie. And even if it's not a werewolf movie, I can see the things in it that make it a Landis film. And so that movie really opened up a lot of my curiosity for filmmaking and storytelling and the way that you tell a story and the things that you choose to include versus what you leave out. That movie hit right at the right time for me. I was just starting to explore the idea of writing stories down, not just thinking them up, but writing them down. And so that and the way that the language progresses in the dialogue, I studied all of that in a way that probably wasn't healthy.
Something else that I really love about this movie is it does seem to be playing a little bit with the tropes, but then kind of subverts them and throws them on their head. One thing that I know it's a trope, but in a lot of the older movies, the 40s, even into the 50s, there's always that person in authority who completely buys what's happening. We don't get into the authority not believing something until in the 70s or the 80s or whatever.
Right.
And we seem like we have a little bit of both here with the one police inspector or whatever he is. But we also have the doctor from the hospital who is at least entertaining the idea that maybe he is turning into something. Dr. Hirsch's character. And I like having both of them there. But I like having that kind of passing, this awkward passing of the torch from the approach of having the authority believe versus not believing.
Yeah.
I kind of liked that too. And John Woodvine really stood out to me as somebody to watch in this film. I really enjoyed what he was doing.
I agree. I like that he comes around. He's not going to allow that it's a supernatural thing. He knows that everything's not right. He's investigating the mystery of why his wounds were cleaned and dressed and why they seem to be covering it up. And that part made it more believable.
Yeah.
And I like the idea that even if he thinks he's not turning into a werewolf, he thinks he can hurt himself or hurt other people.
Right.
There's this wonderful moment in the movie where you think, if they could just get him, if they could just put him in a cell, if they could just catch, and then you go, oh, no, it's a werewolf. Come on. He won't go quietly into the canine unit.
No, he will not.
He will not. But yeah, that was a nice little, a way to sort of, I think, pull us in as, maybe not fans, but we know that it's a werewolf. But Alex's character, Alex Nurse Price, is the same way. I think there's something really wrong with you, but I don't think it's what you think it is. I think you're just deeply troubled by what you've seen. So that's a wonderful thing to play off of, especially when he's crossing the square, trying to get someone to arrest him. It turns into this kind of funny thing, and you don't have that in any of the other movies. Once Talbot or once Oliver Reed realizes what they are, you're kind of on a slow march to the end. But there's still a chance that he can be helped in this. And I thought for just a second, if they could just catch him, maybe they could, find a way. And then we cut to the moon and you hear that horrifying howl.
Which was fantastic.
Such a great, it just sounds, that's what a werewolf sounds like, right? You'd never heard it before, but yep, that's it. Yeah. And then that howl hits and I go, oh no, this will not end well.
Yeah. The howl is fantastic. It's like 7 or 8 different animals combined to make that howl, and it's so good.
And there's a in the middle of it is this almost like scream of anguish. There's like this painful kind of a thing in the middle of it. I hate that that's probably outside of the Blues Brothers, I think that and the Blues Brothers are Landis's 2 best movies. I don't think he ever really recovered from what happened on the set of The Twilight Zone, but I think American Werewolf stands out in all of the films of this time period as really one of the most unique horror movies I think you can experience.
Yeah, and somebody else thought so much they made a sequel, and that's all I want to say.
It was without a doubt a sequel.
I saw it in the theater. I was one of the people. I know. I was. I'm going to have to turn in my Monster Kid card after this. Haven't seen Sinners. I admit to have seen An American Werewolf in Paris. Ugh.
Oh my God.
I know.
You wanted it to be good.
I did.
We're all hoping, right? I like the guy that they cast in the role. And then you find out that, I think it was trying to be 3 or 4 different things. And none of them were a real werewolf movie.
I don't remember anything about it other than thinking there was way too much CG. That's all I remember.
Exponentially.
That's all I remember.
Yep.
I did not remember or did not know, and I was going to ask you if you have listened to this. BBC did an audio drama version of American Werewolf in London. Are you aware of this at all?
I was not aware of this. Shut the front door. That's amazing.
That's I guess I don't know when it came out, but I found it while I was looking things up. I haven't listened to it yet. I'll send you the link. It's on YouTube.
Oh, please.
I cannot wait to listen to it. And I think some of the original cast came back, but not the big players.
Wow. I know that they kept their radio theater stuff going years after America abandoned it. So I'm wondering if it's full cast audio with all of that, or
well, it looks like BBC Radio 1 did it. And yeah, Jenny Agutter, John Woodvine came back. So
outstanding.
I'll have to listen to it, and I'll send you the link and listen. So I'll put a link in the show notes.
Absolutely. That's really, really cool. Wow.
Yeah.
I did not think I was going to learn anything new tonight, and thank you for that. That is good news indeed, man.
And then the other person who really liked this movie was Michael Jackson, which led to the Thriller music video. Say what you want about Michael Jackson, whatever. I was obsessed with that music video as a kid, and especially the making of video that they put out with it. Because like I said, I used to think I'd be a filmmaker when I grew up, and I absorbed all that stuff as much as I could.
Yep. The making of was fantastic. I don't still own it. I owned the video cassette, which was the making of Thriller with the whole thing and all of that good stuff. And I've had the same thing. I didn't want to make movies, but I definitely thought that I could have a career as a special effects artist. That was my goal. I just wanted to make monster masks. That whole video, honestly, that is peak Landis right there. That is everything John Landis is and does, and it's every one of his filming tricks. It's all of the stuff that he likes. If I needed to clone him, I'd pull 3 frames out of Thriller and use that, because that's got it all, man. It's everything he ever did and liked and so forth. Anyways, just interesting stuff.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with Rick Baker. They showed his artwork where he painted over Michael Jackson's own face on acetate to show the different layers of the transformation. I remember seeing that and going, it must be so cool to work in his studio, man.
Man, it would have been amazing.
It would have. Yeah. I can't imagine. I don't know that I would have enjoyed working for Tom Savini, but I think I probably would have really liked working for Rick Baker.
I would have taken any of them at where I was. Sure. But then I was in Cheyenne, Wyoming, and it was hard to find that kind of education there. So
yes,
but when you're a kid, you're kind of stuck where your parents are. So
it is very true. Yeah. In Abilene, Texas, it wasn't quite as. Yeah, it kind of was. I'd have been happy with Bud Westmore.
Hey, I'll take it. I'll take it. I would have taken. He would have taken credit for everything, but I'll take. Well, as we wrap up, is there anything else you want to say about An American Werewolf in London that we haven't touched on? I feel like there's so much more to say, but
yeah, I know. I feel like we also spoiled it for someone that hadn't seen it yet.
There's always spoiler warnings. We're good.
All that being said, I think this is one that every serious horror connoisseur should watch and have an opinion about. I will say this: I don't know of anybody that doesn't like the movie. I can't think of a single person that doesn't like American Werewolf. If they've seen it, and they may be like, oh, it wasn't very scary. And I'll go, yeah, but did you like it? Oh yeah, it was great. It just wasn't scary. And that's a valid criticism. But I think that's interesting because we all disagree about a great many things, and sometimes it's to be contrarian and sometimes it's because we've got weird tastes, but American Werewolf kind of cuts through all of that. I really do. And for being a film set in the 80s, it hangs and holds together and holds up very, very well. I think you can show it to a modern audience, and even though they'll go, that's not CGI, they will still react and respond to the way the film is shot and the way the special effects are shot. So if anybody's listening to this that hasn't seen the movie, it's a must do. You got to put it on your to-do list. Seriously.
I cannot agree more. This is definitely a classic of, I'm going to say modern horror. I mean, but it also touches on all the classic stuff too. So it's a nice bridge between the two, which makes it perfect fodder to talk about here on the podcast, I think.
Cool.
So glad you brought it up. And we'll have you on the show again. We'll turn you into a Monster Kid Radio regular.
I'd love that. That'd be great. I'd love to come back.
We'll find something to talk about. And between now and then, though, you've got all sorts of stuff going on. I mentioned the North Texas Apocalypse Bunker, which is at northtexasapocalypsebunker.com.
Yep.
A link in the show notes, of course. And then we've got a new anthology coming out later this year, Swords and Larceny. And I loved how you described it to me before I hit record.
It is Ocean's 11 meets the Fellowship of the Ring. It's capers and heists set in sword and sorcery worlds. And I am really happy and pleased with how it came together. My co-editor, David, and I, we took a while to figure out how we wanted to do it and who we wanted in it. And I'm really pleased with the spread of serious to maybe not quite comical, but, comedy of errors kind of capers. Bull Willingham wrote a story for it. James Eames wrote a story for it. Ailey Martinez is in there. Jim Zub, the guy that's doing the Conan books right now. John Hawking, another Conan author. I wrote a story as well. For the 9 of you that care, there's a story in there set in. It's a group of people I've been writing stories about for a while, and they've been in a couple of places. So it was cool to put that in this book as well, as it's sort of an example of the kind of thing. But yeah, that'll be out the first weekend in September. Swords and Larceny from Baen. It's available for pre-order now if anybody wants to jump in and increase the number on the Amazon rankings by 1. That would be fantastic. I think we're up to like 500,000 now.
So by 2, because I already promised Mark as soon as my next paycheck hits, Sam promoting in a pre-order. He mentioned some of the other names on here. Ed Erdelak's also in there, and he's a fantastic writer. I'm a big fan of his work. I'm looking forward to discovering some people I've never heard before. So this will be fun.
I hope you dig it. And I hope everybody that thinks that's interesting goes and gets a copy and likes it. It's a real passion project for me. I hope I get to do another one.
And also between now and then, you will be attending Howard Days. Are you a presenter or doing anything there, or just going to go as a fan?
Well, Derek, I'm kind of a big deal over there.
Well, I wasn't going to say that. But I've been nervous honestly, as thinking about talking to you. Come on.
This late in my fan scholar existence, I show up and they just tell me what to do. So this year I'm doing the bus tour. We drive around all of the other places that Howard lived.
Killing me.
And we have, I'll tell you my favorite thing. This is the thing. I'm emceeing the banquet. Without fail, this is the panel that we've been doing for over 20 years now. Wow. It's Fists of the Ice House, and me and Chris Gruber and Jeff Shanks. And if Patrice is there, Patrice, we get together and we talk about the boxing stories, and we will read from the boxing stories some of our favorite scenes and passages and stuff. And that always gets a good crowd. And there's always somebody that walks up to me afterwards and says, I had no idea that he was funny. Yes, I win. So I love that. That's great fun. But yeah, it really has become kind of a relaxicon, sort of a family reunion, sort of a deal for me at this rate. I just show up to hang out, eat barbecue, and talk to friends and people that always like to bring comics. And here's an Italian graphic novel. Bobby Deary's really good about that. He's always bringing like weird stuff that he finds on the internet to show. And so it's a great opportunity, and it's a pilgrimage. You will not be disappointed if you ever make the trip. It's a lot to do because it's not in a big town and you have to be intentional about going to Cross Plains, but I've not heard anybody ever say, yeah, it wasn't worth going. Everybody has really gotten something out of it. And I know that you would kind of just lose your mind a little bit.
Some year, one of these years, I'm going to get a chance to go. I have followed all the YouTube videos that end up getting posted. I think it's Ben Freiberg posts the YouTube videos of the various panels, and I watch them, and I've watched them more than once. And Make no secret, man. I love Robert E. Howard. So
I'll make you a deal.
What's that?
If you ever show up,
yeah,
bring your portable recording stuff. We'll do a live podcast there. Here's what's cool is I'll introduce you to Jeff Shanks and some of the other guys who are all the same person as me. So we can have large discussions about, which Frankenstein cleaves closest to our, you know what I mean? Like we'll go in the weeds with that if you want to. But yeah, we'll do a live recording or a live broadcast or a thing there. I think that would be a cool. And now it's something that you could bring up to the wife.
Oh, she already wants to. She's on board. She's on board. We haven't done this in a while, but for a long time, one of our nightly traditions was to read short stories to each other before we go to sleep. And I was always cooling out Robert E. Howard stuff. So, so she's on board.
That's awesome, man. That's really cool. I think you'll really dig it. It's great. And so, yeah, whenever you decide to make that trek, just let me know and we'll make plans.
That would be awesome. And listeners, you heard it here. We're going to hold Mark to that. And we are going to have him back. We'll find someone else to talk about, even if it's Robert E. Howard flavored, or if it's not, whatever. I'm sure we can find plenty of things to talk about.
I'm ready to go.
Mark, thanks for doing this. I really appreciate you.
Such a pleasure, man. Thank you so much.
I'd like to thank everybody who wrote into the show this week and contributed feedback. Remember, you can do that by emailing us at monsterkidradio@gmail.com, or you can call and leave us a voicemail at 360-524-2484. You can find that information over on our website at monsterkidradio.net. I also want to thank Kenny for coming back with a look at famous monsters of Filmland. It was awesome to get him back into the mix. I'd like to thank Mark Matzke for his continued awesome, dare I say, ultra work with his beta capsule review. And of course, to Mark Finn for taking the time to talk with us here on the show and to bring another voice to the mix. And I'm serious. I want to have him back on the show to talk about something else. I think Mark and I can talk for hours about monster movies and not running out of things to say. Hopefully you'd like to hear that. Let me know. Email me, monsterkidradio@gmail.com. Anyway, Mark, thank you for doing that. Thank you for being part of the show. And thank you, Monster Kids, for listening to the show this week and every week. If you're brand new to the show, welcome. If you've been here all along, thanks for sticking around. Check us out over at monsterkidradio.net, where you've got all of our contact information. You can also find us on all the various social media platforms, X, Blue Sky, Instagram. We're all over the place. We have a Discord. We have a Reddit. But what we really would love for you to do is check out our Patreon at patreon.com/monsterkidradio. Now, you can follow us on Patreon without actually becoming a paying patron. We have a free level. And every week when I update the various social media outlets with show notes, information about the most recent episode, I make sure I post it there as well. And it's usually there that I first announce who is going to be on the show next week. So if you want to know before everybody else, you got to follow us for free over at patreon.com/monsterkidradio. I know I haven't uploaded any videos, but I do have some plans for upcoming episodes of House of Monster Kid Radio to go over there. In fact, Beth and I are going to be going to Phoenix Fan Fusion this upcoming weekend here in Phoenix, Arizona, Friday 6th, 7th, and 8th. Now, we are going to be there as part of Cactus Brick, which is the Phoenix Lug or Lego user group. This is a club of Lego enthusiasts of AFOLs, adult fans of Lego. Lego really loves its acronyms. We are a couple of AFOLs, and we have a couple of items that are going to be on display with the rest of our fellow Cactus Brick members. However, we're also going to be running around and trying to enjoy ourselves at the convention as well. This is the first year we've been to Fan Fusion, and I've looked at the schedule. It's huge. Compared to the conventions I used to go to in Portland, Oregon, this seems to have a lot. It seems to have a lot of space. It seems to have a lot of celebrities and a lot of panels and, coincidentally, a lot of things that might provide content for upcoming episodes of Bride of Monster Kid Radio. So I'm going to bring my camera. I'm going to bring my microphone, and hopefully we'll capture something at Fan Fusion that we can turn into a video for a House of Monster Kid Radio, and maybe even a future episode of the Bride of Monster Kid Radio podcast. I know that at least one of you, Phil Lehman, I'm looking at you, kind of, sort of, okay, not really, that would be creepy, but I'm looking at your email where you told us that you're going to be at Fan Fusion as well. I would love to meet you, sir. If any of you are going to be in the Phoenix area and are going to be at Phoenix Fan Fusion, look up Beth, look up myself. We would love to meet you, take a selfie, hang out, chat, get to meet you. We love meeting fellow monster kids. We love meeting listeners of the podcast out in the wild. So look us up there. As I said, we are going to be doing more werewolf content later this month. All the episodes of this month's podcast will be werewolf themed, but what will we be talking about next week? Well, you're going to have to follow us over on Patreon to find out, or you're just going to have to come back in 7 days. So stay subscribed to Bride of Monster Kid Radio. Bride of Monster Kid Radio is a Team Death production. All original content of Bride of Monster Kid Radio is licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution, Non-Commercial, No Derivatives 4.0 Unported license. You can learn more about Team Death, our other projects like Death Designs, Mail Order Zombie, the Team Death YouTube channel, and more at www.teamdeath.com. Remember, death is spelled D-E-T-H. All previous episodes of this podcast, as well as the original Monster Kid Radio podcast, are available at www.monsterkidradio.net. Please rate and review Bride of Monster Kid Radio wherever you download your favorite podcasts. Dos Diablos is copyright 2023, the Nematoads. This is from their album 5 Guns West. You can find them over at the nematoads.bandcamp.com, or just go to nematoads.com, or follow the link in the show notes at monsterkidradio.net. Check out what they do. Check out all of their albums. And let them know that you heard about them here on Bride of Monster Kid Radio. My name's Derek M. Cook. I will talk to everybody next week. Ciao.